Yeah, so I guess we can start with our second League of Legends meeting first in the new year. So at our previous meetup, we talked a little bit about what's the perspective of League of Legends in Slovenia, and if we want to accelerate this scene, the growth of it. We need to have a more organized system for tournaments, for team base, for sponsors to join the whole ecosystem. And we do believe that there's a large pool of players, some already playing abroad and on a global level as pros, Slovenians, which means that it can be done if you want it to. It's possible, but then the question is what needs to happen, how do we need to do it, what needs to happen with the environment for more people to be able to go pro. And I think the important part here is for everyone to even know what it means to be a pro, because everyone has maybe their own perception of what this means and how this works and how to do it, but at the end, if you don't succeed, you never know. So I'm welcoming everyone to this meetup, and maybe just a little bit about these meetups briefly for anyone who is joining for the first time. So the point of these meetups is to enable networking, to enable to get to know each other, to share different experience, to maybe attract people that wanted to be a part of esports in any way possible but never knew how to, and we're giving an opportunity here for this to happen, and of course create the community that will build this ecosystem that will eventually happen, but we need to start somewhere. So here we are, trying to help, trying to support, trying to connect. A little bit about me. So my name is Jure. I'm the founder of Reveries Accelerator for esports and gaming. And today with me, I'm very, very happy to be joined by Bor Kektz Jeršan, one of the I would say few pro players that managed to get recognition, to manage to get a proper pro player title. And really happy that you could join us, that you will be able to share your experience, your path to becoming a pro player.
Hello, I'm happy to be here as well.
Okay. Let's start a bit slowly and then we'll ramp it up. So if first you can maybe introduce a little bit about yourself, maybe just like where you're coming from, how you got in contact with League of Legends. Did you play any games before? Did you maybe consider being a pro in other games? Just a little bit how League of Legends happened before you became a pro, like this.
Well, I've always had like an interest in video games, obviously, ever since when I was a kid. Also, probably thanks to my brother, because he's also quite the nerd. I think like I started playing a lot of Dota, like the custom game mode for Warcraft 3, which is like the first original MOBA, I guess. And then after that, I saw that they're making a new MOBA called League, so I decided to try it since it's a free game, and I don't see why not. I never actually intended to really go pro. I just kind of played League with friends, then eventually switched to solo queue. I got a high enough ranking, and then once I got like a good enough rank, a friend of mine asked if I'm up to maybe play a few like local Slovenian LANs, and I said like why not? You know, like I was still in high school, so we had a lot of time, and like the idea of competing in video games like was kind of like sounded cool to me, so we went for it, and we actually like won quite a few LANs in like those 2 years where we played together. And then after that, I basically since I still played solo queue, I got like a pretty good ranking, and eventually got like offer from a German team, and then it just kind of, I guess I could say like I don't know, snowballed from there, or how to say, like I just basically got better and better offers like with time.
Okay.
So then I would say like around 2016 is when I decided to like try this like full like all in and just like go full time league.
Cool. So like I said before, you're one of the few players that manage in Slovenia for now. I'm fairly sure that more people will come to that level, but there are only a few Slovenian esports players who can say that they're pro, which means that they're actually making I would say making money from competitively playing video games. And most of them play for teams in other countries, of course. But why is that? Why do you think that they don't have they can't stay here, or they cannot play in teams here in Slovenia?
I mean, I think like the first big reason is obviously like money, because I feel like if you play, like for me, like when I played in Slovenian lands, you know, it was mostly just like you just got like the prizes out of it, and that was kind of it. There was like no really organizations or any like sponsorship or stuff like that. So usually when like foreign teams approach you, you know, it's like a bit more serious, and they usually always like kind of like come with the salary and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the biggest factor is obviously this, and the other factor is that there's just way more competition in Slovenia right now. I mean, even though we have like quite a decent amount of like good players, I personally don't think it's enough to make like the scene as competitive as it is. So I feel like pretty much every like big league, for example, like German, French, Spanish league, and like Nordic league, like the biggest ones, they all have basically imports from like all over Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have like the smaller leagues, like I don't know, Czech league. You could even maybe consider Slovenian league and stuff like that, who have basically mostly local players. So usually every player from like these smaller leagues, when he gets like a bigger offer, will usually just like leave his league and just join like the big leagues, which I guess makes sense like for like personal growth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You probably know most of these Slovenian pro players. Would you say that
Yeah.
all of them, or most of them, not all of them, most of them went about the same path? Meaning, I started in Slovenia, I started playing with the friends, got into these LANs, got a bit successful, managed to climb solo queue, and then got offer from any foreign teams. Or is there any story that you know that goes a little bit different from that?
I mean, I would say like, for example, Mikix, like the first LCS player basically, and he's still like right now that he's playing support in G2. I feel like he's a bit of an exception, because with him it was basically mostly just solo queue. Like he did play a few Slovenian lands, but he never really, I guess, played in minor leagues like I did, for example, at the start. He just instantly basically got invited into Splice in LCS. So I think he's like quite a big exception. But for the others, yeah, it's been mostly like this. They've like played in Slovenia, then they got opportunities to play in like, I think, French league for Crown Shot, and then eventually Spanish league. And then from there, when like if you can prove like you're really good at like these top tier leagues, then you can also like you have a pretty good chance to make it to LCS then for the next split, which is kind of what happened with in this case like Crown Shot and Nemesis.
And for example, if we wanted, I mean, it's a long shot, of course, but if we wanted to have an organization here in Slovenia, would it make sense to keep them here and try to get them here, or is, I don't know, experience that you get outside of Slovenia, that you will get outside of Slovenia, and then stay there, or maybe how to bring them back, how to make the players that are good enough to compete on the highest level, how to, I'm going to say, use them in Slovenia to promote this scene, or how to bring them back and help us bring this Slovenian scene a little bit higher. What would need to happen? What do you think would, for example, how would we motivate them to do that? And that doesn't necessarily mean that they would stop playing abroad, that they would connect with the local Slovenian scene and try to help us raise it.
I mean, I personally don't really know what would be the best option, because from like knowing them personally, a lot of them don't really have interest to like do anything in the Slovenian scene. I don't really know the reasons, but yeah, like they just don't really have the interest. So I think it's more up to them if they like want to do like local interviews, like for like Slovenian news and stuff like that. I think that would be like for sure the best approach. And maybe maybe like some of them even like presents at like a meeting like similar to this one or something like that. That would also be really good, because I think they would attract quite a big audience. And then for them to like in terms of playing, I don't think there's like any option for them to like ever consider playing back here, because even just the competition outside of Slovenia is just so much better. And like even personally for me, it's just way more fun to play because the matches are actually like way closer. Like the other teams are usually way better. In Slovenia, it's always been an issue. You just have like 2 really good teams at a tournament, and then you just kind of know they're gonna win. I would say like the best approach to expand esports in Slovenia is to just do it through the Balkan scene, or in this case like EBL, at least for league, because I guess it's like kind of like we're part of it, and we also have like Slovenian teams, and I think there's like 2-3 players there also playing at the moment, like in this split in Balkan. And I think if we make like a good Slovenian team for that and maybe make a name for ourselves there, then we can start like maybe, I guess, spreading the word, or how to say, like to other leagues, and maybe have like more exposure in this case. Because I feel like doing it purely like in Slovenia would be like really hard, because I feel yeah, just the amount, like there's just not enough people yet. Like we would need a lot more time.
Yeah, I agree. Even looking at other teams, I'm not that familiar with all of the teams and how they're what members they have, but usually it's multi-nationality in one team. Even if it's a, I don't know, German brand, it's usually not just Germans playing there, right? So even in Slovenia that wouldn't make sense, but even it would make even less sense because the pool of the players is that much smaller. But we would need one kind of organization, I think, that would step up and like, so that we could say, okay, we have a strong Slovenian brand. We have, I don't know, maybe like you mentioned, I think this is a very good point, a pool of players from the Balkans. We have a couple of Slovenians from Serbia, from Bosnia, from Croatia, whatever. But such an organization usually also needs support, and you being in a few teams from that are considered professional, how much support, for example, did you get before you went to the team abroad? How much support did you get in the local environment when you were like becoming on your way to becoming a pro?
I mean, I had like a good amount of support, especially at the start, because I guess I was at that time like the first like Slovenian player to ever like play abroad, even though I never actually like played in like LCS. But so at that time, I think there was like quite a lot of support from people, like from random people who watch tournaments. And I also feel like when I competed in Slovenian lands, like in 2013, 14, and I think 15 a bit, there was also like way more hype because the scene was kind of new. The game was also like only 3 years old, so it was fresh. A lot of like pretty much every other person played League at that time. Like legit every person you met outside, like half of them would play League. So I think like the community was like probably bigger and at least way more interested in the scene. So I think in terms of support, I definitely got a lot of it. But I also got kind of lucky myself because I also got a lot of support from like my parents and my friends and stuff like that. So for me, I feel like there is definitely like support, but I feel like a lot of the players, like including myself, we don't really interact with the Slovenian fan base enough or at all, like to actually help out the scene a bit as well, I think, or like, yeah.
Do you think that's a good point? You said you don't interact with Slovenian fan base. For example, I know that Mickey, for example, okay, he's a big name, right? So he has like a large reach. But would an aspiring pro player, would it make sense for him to, I don't know, start with streaming, start with Twitch, start with social media interaction? How would someone build this support, and does this help you, or is maybe this even in some way stopping you in terms of maybe demotivating you at a certain point? Because we know that fans can be very, very nice when you're doing good, but when you're doing bad, maybe sometimes they can be harsh. You know, it's like.
I mean, it depends. I feel like if you're an aspiring pro in Slovenia and you just wanna like play abroad, I think even if you do bad, most people will support you just because like you're playing abroad, so they don't really care about this. Obviously, the fans and like if you play in Germany and you do really bad, maybe you'll have like some fans like, I guess, flame you, or how to say. But I personally, for me, I don't know, I never really felt bothered by it. I think it also kind of depends how are you as a person. Like if you're obviously like really annoying or just like to shit talk a lot yourself, you'll obviously get way more backlash than you normally would. But yeah, I mean, it can definitely have a toll on a lot of players. Like personally, for me, I never really got affected much by like opinions of others. But I definitely know a lot of players who really care a lot about what fans think about them and the way they present themselves. And it definitely gets to a lot of players, and some even like maybe just quit social media completely because they just can't handle it.
Yeah. In terms of support, you talked a little bit about the fan support and your parents supporting them. Do you think that you did anything special, or how did you manage to convince your parents, for example, that this is something that would make sense for you? Because probably you had to make some sacrifices to go to this path, right?
I mean, for me, it was kind of like right after when I finished high school and I started like spending more time with League. I guess my parents were like, they were like more okay with it, like after I was done with school, obviously. And by the time I was like starting to get like paid, and I actually was like getting like livable like wages, they at that time they were like, yeah, sure, just go for it. You know, they weren't really like bothered by it. And I also got really lucky because since my brother is also a huge gamer, he kind of he was following the esports scene like way before, like from like StarCraft 1 days and stuff like that. So he knew the scene a lot more than me. And he also had like a talk with both of them about it, and I guess he also low-key convinced them to be okay with it. So for that, I also owe it to him. But when it came to pure support from fans, like I think I was just like at the time in Slovenian lands, I was just really good. Like I feel like since we won every tournament, I was always like performing really well, especially on top lane. I don't think there was like any good top laners at that time, so it was kind of easy from that regard. So yeah. I think like since there wasn't that much competition, it was kind of like easy at the start.
Yeah. It's nice to hear that, because we talked about this even on our previous meetup, like how parents can be a big factor in people becoming pros and people trying to live the esports life, because in some cases they're a little bit more, I don't know, conservative in terms of understanding how this works and how this ecosystem works. And it's nice to see that this might be changing. I also think that it's slowly changing, but hopefully it can help us achieve more people being able to pursue this career professionally, and that's a very, very, very important point here. Becoming a pro and then getting paid for playing always brings additional like challenges in terms of I don't know, legal, contractual stuff, and sometimes not sometimes, usually people that are becoming pro players are younger. They're not very, very well versed in this real world scenario, right? So maybe they're not familiar with all this legal background bureaucracy that's going on, that these contracts, and maybe can get intimidated. Did you get any help in terms of like legal advice or something from anyone, or did you just manage to do it yourself to navigate through it?
I mean, I never really went like to outside sources, but I always basically went to my dad and just asked him like to read the contract with me, since like he knows about the stuff way more. And yeah, like from my experience, like the contracts I got were never like really shady. Like even the organizations that I joined, like I wasn't shady. They weren't shady. And what also really helps is what you can also just do, since like on Twitter and like in like League esports, everybody basically knows each other. You can just ask a guy who was in the team before about like the organization, like they contacted you, and usually people will just be honest. So I think it's kind of easy to avoid like fishy orgs, but sometimes, you know, it still happens. Like they're still basically scamming people every day. And since like, as you mentioned, there's a lot of young players that like really need to be careful. So I feel like either you just go to your parents if they're familiar with it, or worst case scenario, maybe just like go to like even the lawyer or something. Like you can just like pay a little bit and some guy will just read the contract and tell you if you're good to go. So yeah, I never had any issues with any of that.
Cool. I know there's one law firm in Slovenia that advertises itself as specializing in helping with this legal part of esports. Do you think that with more brands coming up, more teams coming out, you said that fishy things do happen, but in your opinion, is there a necessity for such companies to exist, do you think? Maybe even from other experts, it doesn't maybe need to be legal, maybe also think about agents for scouting and trying to bring players to teams. How do you see this whole ecosystem that is already evolved in abroad, but is still in very early stages in Slovenia?
I mean, for Slovenia, I guess I don't really know much, but for abroad, like it's kind of weird because sometimes it feels like really good, but then sometimes it feels like really bad because there's been a lot of examples for like players have agents, obviously. Some like there's even sometimes like people write to me on Twitter that they're like an agency or whatever, and if I wanna like work with them. And one issue here is that what like a lot of, since they like discuss with the player and like what the player is like looking for in a team, etc., a lot of agents maybe like they get contacted by an org and then they maybe sometimes like request too much, even though like the player maybe didn't even want it, and then like they can screw over the player in this case, because then the team is like, okay, yeah, this player demands way too much, we're not gonna take him, like fuck that. But sometimes it's really good because you have a lot of these like young inexperienced players that were like an agency can really help them with the contract, because they're really not familiar, they maybe get like insane like deal from like even LCS teams. So like I'm a bit skeptical like about the whole like thing, because I personally don't feel like I need an agent myself, because I feel like I can negotiate with teams like well enough and I have a lot of experience with it, but I can definitely see it helping a lot of like younger players. But then there's also the case of like, since these people are young, like 16, 17, and they've never ever had like contracts and stuff like that, a lot of agents will also scam them, kind of like the same way orgs do. So I feel like since in like maybe 5 years, once the scene is way more established, it's gonna be like way better, because I feel like a lot of like the shady stuff is gonna, it's gonna probably like, there's gonna be less shady stuff. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. The bad weeds will get weeded out.
Yeah, something like that.
And the good brands will prevail. Do you think that these things? I think this is really important part, because it's basically the stepping stone, the first stepping stone that you do when you enter the esports scene. Do you think that? Yeah, I mean, you said it. You don't know what the scene in Slovenia is, but how do you see maybe these agencies abroad? You already mentioned that some of them are shady, but do you know any that are like already branded as being really good? And is there an ecosystem that really exists in other countries that is already well established and is like, you exactly know where to go if you want to be sure that you're going to get a good deal, even if you're going to pay a little bit more, right? That's always the case.
I don't exactly know the names right now. I think there's like one agency like Level Up or something like that that's like decent from what I heard. And then also some other, like there are definitely like a few agencies who are good. And I mean, I feel like usually most agencies and most organizations are usually good. I would say like 95% of organizations will not scam you. The only issue is there's always like that 5%. And then if you're like unlucky and the first time you talk to someone, it's like that 5%, it can like really ruin the whole like perspective of every other org you're gonna go to, or like every new org. Obviously, like the big names like Fnatic, TSM, G2, you're gonna be like, okay, whatever, I trust these guys. But like every time there is like a new org, if you had bad experiences in the past, it definitely like affects like the decision making and how the player feels about it, So that's kind of like the issue with, I mean, I guess that's kind of the issue with everything. Like there's always that 5% of like bad stuff that can like go wrong always. So you just kind of need to be also a bit lucky.
Yeah, I mean, but I would say that's a pretty good percentage. If it's like that, that's a pretty safe environment, so to speak.
I mean, yeah, overall, I mean, maybe I'm over exaggerating because I guess speaking from experience, it's probably like 15%, because I had like an organization that completely scammed us basically, or I guess it happened 2 times, but both times it was like a bit minor, so I didn't make much of it. But yeah, like the people still scam. I feel like a lot of people like in esports, the issue is since you basically, it's hard to like really make profit, especially when you're like a completely new team. It's hard to really make profit of the players. A lot of teams basically make deals beforehand, before they get any sponsorships, or they just rely they will get sponsors. And then basically when the day comes, they don't get the sponsors, and then they can't even pay the players or do anything they promised. And then it basically just spirals like out of control and goes completely downhill. Like that's like the biggest issue that a lot of people doing esports, like they say stuff first before they actually can do it. Kind of like the same what happened with the whole like LAN in Slovenia, like the gaming resource was kind of the same. They basically planned the money they will get in advance and then they never got it. So yeah.
Yeah. I understand.
If I may jump in, I have a question on this, exactly on the topics of sponsorships.
Yeah.
May I?
Right. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So of course, organizations live mostly by having sponsorships, so to say, advertising, and this is then passed down to the players, to you being a pro player.
Yeah.
What is the relationship here? Do some organizations require you to do a lot of, I don't know, sponsorship materials on top of playing? Are some pushing you in this direction more or less? How is this perceived from your end? For example, a company gives you a higher salary, an organization gives you a higher salary. You don't care what you have to do besides playing, or it impacts your everyday if you have to do a ton of other stuff on top of it?
I mean, I think that's an issue that most organizations don't demand enough, like from players. For example, every team I've ever been a part of, none of them ever demanded like we have to stream. And usually, like teams who demand for you to stream, they don't even want that much. They say like, I don't know, just do like 10 hours a week. You know, that's like 2 hours per day. That's like nothing. And for me, I think that's kind of really bad because one thing, it will like motivate the players to stream more, which is just good, you know, unless they're like insanely shy, then maybe you can work something out. The other, it really helps the organization as a brand because basically the player also advertises for the organization. And then 3, you could also maybe talk about, yeah, as a player having like a higher salary. So for me, that's really weird that more teams don't do that, because I feel like it would be definitely like the right step to like expand esports at least, you know, because streaming is, I think, the best way to interact with the fan base as a player or even as an organization. And I feel like, yeah, most teams are just, yeah, we have, here is your salary, you just play, and yeah, you know, then after the split is over, we will discuss the contract again, because usually most contracts are like really short term. Most teams basically give you a contract for like the 3 months that the split lasts. And then after that, if you do really well, maybe they keep you or maybe they don't. I don't know, depends how well you did. But when it comes to pure like streaming, no, they don't like really demand anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's sort of you know that when marketing wise, like the audience that you pro players and the brands that are advertising through pro players is not that much of a, how to say, they don't see these advertisements as something that is gonna convince them to buy something. Like, I don't know, I'm just gonna make something up. If Cristiano Ronaldo shoots a commercial about deodorant, that's like
yeah, everyone is gonna buy that.
Yeah, that's something completely different than if, I don't know, some big shot pro player would be advertising that he's buying I don't know, Nike or something, right? Yeah. It wouldn't work like that. But yeah, it's interesting that even through the media that pro players are using, streaming, as you said, that this isn't requested.
Yeah, it's usually not requested. I mean, I feel like it would work really well if you do the advertisement for like gaming gear, obviously. But yeah, when it comes to other stuff, it's probably a bit harder. But since like the market is basically growing, I think it's like in the future, it's definitely gonna be looked into it more. Because yeah, as I said, like streaming is, I think, by far the best way to advertise anything like gaming related.
Yeah, and I think especially interesting is that at the start, esports was mostly supported by the everything revolving PC, right? All the PC industry, mouse, that brands, these brands, and now other different industries are coming into esports advertising, and maybe this will change a little bit because they have a little bit different model than PC companies developed, and maybe this will change a little bit. But I don't know. It's interesting what you mentioned. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, as Nusha just said, yeah, at like the highest level is definitely done a lot more. Like with LCS, like it's for sure much different. Like I don't really know personally since I never played there. But when it comes to pure like semi-pro level, then yeah, teams really don't request much from players apart from you like showing up for scrims, and yeah, that's it. Then it's usually up to like the player to go to the coach and everything and ask for more, which I think like is obviously good. Yeah, like the player like approaches himself, but I also feel like it's would be way better, especially for younger players, if like the org or the coach encourages them to do this more, you know, because usually like when you're young, you're kind of, yeah, you know, it's nice, I play video games, you know, I just still want to go out with friends, etc. Yeah, like they definitely care a bit less, I guess.
Yeah, care less about this business side of the entire industry that supports basically them and everything around. Yeah,
pretty much.
Sorry,
I'm intrigued by the comment that Nusha did. How would you draw the line between pro and semi-pro? Talking about organizations, not about players.
For organizations, I mean, that's I actually don't know when with organizations. I guess I would say, I mean, honestly don't know. I guess like all the like really big orgs, like every LCS org, I would consider like they're definitely like very professional level. And then also if you look at like the top 3, top 4 leagues, and like as I mentioned before, like German, Spanish, Nordic League, they all have academy teams that are basically part of the main teams in LCS. So I would also consider those teams to be very professional. But then most of like the small orgs, I would say they're like in the smaller leagues like Balkan, etc. I would say it's all like way more like semi-professional and not a serious set, but it's getting there. I think like as the viewership gets bigger and like there's more interest, it's just gonna like teams will suddenly realize, yeah, okay, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, and I feel like it's gonna probably like happen way more.
Thanks. Sorry for jumping in, but I'm really intrigued by this.
Yeah, no problem.
Is it so? Are there kind of some organizations that live only part-time? So we know the big names are full-time organizations. They operate all year round.
Yeah.
But you said these Balkan teams, for example, Balkan organizations, they are on a semi-pro level. But does this still mean that they have some uptime and downtime, or they still operate all year round?
I mean, I don't really know. I think I guess it depends of like how many players they have in a team. Because for example, with League, usually it's like you have 2, maybe 3 splits per year, which is like max, I would say 8 to 9 months if you like make it to playoffs every time and you just fully play the game, which that doesn't really happen always. And then like another 4 months, you know, if you only have a league team, there's not really like much to do, you know, you don't have any lands to play, like only local lands maybe, there's not really much to advertise, etc. So I would say like a lot of orgs who expand into different teams, they definitely do operate, I mean, different games, they definitely do operate whole year long. But usually organizations who only focus on one specific game, I would say they definitely have some downtime.
Yeah, it's a good point. Because we know that Fanatics exist in multiple games and those games don't always overlap, and it means that they always have work full time. And
I mean, I think it's good, like, because a lot of like even the smaller organizations, like where I'm part of right now, like Riddle, they have like players in different games as well. I don't really know exactly which games, but I know like they do because like I see. And then also like in a lot of teams that I played before, they definitely had like players in CSGO, FIFA, and stuff like that. So in this case, it's like really good. But yeah, a lot of people just a lot of orgs basically focus on one game as well sometimes, which is not like the best way to advertise your brand.
You managed to have been to a couple of teams, and that probably also means a little bit different environments each time. What do you feel like the team gives you as a player that you, or for example, what is the difference between such teams that you were? Did one give you more than the other? What was the like the best thing that you got from the team, or what did you miss, for example, in some of the teams that you didn't get in any kind of way? Like, is it can either be, I don't know, financial, bureaucracy support, traveling support, any kind of support that you need for you to make your life easier as a pro player, basically.
I mean, one thing that was the case for every team so far in esports is that travel is never really an issue. Usually if you go like either bootcamp, gaming house tournament, whatever, every travel is always covered, like everything. They just basically tell them where you live and they just give you like a plane ticket usually. So that's like really, really nice. But definitely like in some organizations where we had an actual gaming houses are definitely like way better. Like the experience in a gaming house is just completely different. I feel like it helps the team so much because you all live there together like as 5, like in terms of synergy is really good. Because in the end, like if all 5 players are good enough players, the only thing that really matters is how they get along. I would even say outside of the game and how the synergy is. I don't feel like just spamming the game over and over again is always the best way to approach the game. I feel like what you should do, like obviously every player should play a certain amount of like solo queue, and then you have like team practice. And then after that, I feel like the best approach is to just like do some other stuff together. I don't know, maybe like some sports, maybe watch like a movie, I don't know, whatever you want. But definitely like the teams that I was a part of, where all 5 players got along really well. We definitely performed the best, even if we didn't have insane support outside of from the organization or anything. Because I was once in a team where like the organization was basically like didn't really do anything. But since all 5 of us got really like along really well, we actually like had pretty good results in tournaments and stuff like that. And that's why especially nowadays, since like the game is way more team focused, like the only team play matters, and like individual skill is not really that, like it's way less important. I think that's like even a bigger factor than that, like the players spend time together outside of like league.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that the individual skill doesn't matter that more. Do you think that, I know that from the games that I played, and I never played professionally, but I just noticed that from the games that I played, the game sort of through years seems to become easier, right? If there's no like big switch in mechanics, it becomes easier, but it's not easier. It's just that there's a lot more resources on how to learn. There's a lot of more I don't know, materials where you can get your information from. Do you think that it's easier to it's a little bit a provocative question. It's easy to get to the certain level of mechanical skill, so to speak, with your play, and then it's really hard to be a part of the team? Or is this still like very important? I mean, you still basically have to do a lot of grinding to get to that level, and then you can manage your way to the team.
Chill. I mean, yeah, I feel like at the start, like if you're like an unproven guy and you just basically and you just played like the game, like yeah, definitely spamming a lot of solo queue helps to get recognition. And usually when they say like the whole thing, like yeah, pro players grind 12 hours a day, blah blah blah, that's like really not true. Like it's true at the start. Like if you're a completely unproven player and you just want to make it, then yes, usually they will spam a lot. But then once you're at the point where, let's say, you join LCS and you've already made it, I think there is absolutely no way you should be playing 12 hours of solo queue a day, because that's never gonna help you. You're not gonna improve if you spam that much, and I think in the longer you're just gonna get worse and you're just gonna burn out. So usually when for me, when I had a good team, like good environment, if we just played like the team practice together, well, and then outside of the game I played like maybe 2-3 games, I think it was more than enough mechanically, because you do reach your like peak mechanics quite fast, I would say. And then it's mostly about basically getting to like a good enough like elo in solo queue, so like teams will recognize over that. And the other part is also like solo queue really helps with expanding your champion pool and basically experimenting. I think purely in terms of becoming a better player, solo queue is not like the best option you have.
Cool.
And wait, there was also like something else, like some follow-up that I forgot, sorry.
No, it's great. Okay. I just wanted to ask if you think that if with a game that is this old in terms of you have a lot of mechanics, do you think that the harder part is getting the mechanics, or the harder part is getting being the right person for the team?
I think that really depends on like an individual. Like a lot of like, since basically there's still like the whole like stigma around gamers like being like no lifers and stuff like that, which to some extent is obviously like a bit true. Like there are a lot of people who play like video games like a bit too much than they should, and they avoid like a lot of responsibilities and like a lot of social interaction, which in this case is bad. But yeah, for the whole like being a good teammate part, that's like really from person to person. You know, I had like teammates who are like completely like, I don't know, just toxic and just pointless that they were there, and then you have like the nicest teammates who really care about everyone in the team and they just want the whole team to improve. So I feel like it's a lot about the personality. And the thing is, if you don't have like, if you have mechanics, it's you can definitely become a better person and improve on that. But if you don't have mechanics, it's kind of hard for you to really like get that. If like not a good enough player, it's I don't think you will
It's
at some
not
point
gonna
you will
work.
reach your peak sooner, and then like you will just have to work on the other part of the game.
Yeah, I understand.
There's a question from the audience.
Yeah, Nusha here asks, which team organization did you enjoy playing with?
That would definitely be, I think, LDLC when I played in French League, just because the organization was probably the best. And the French scene basically is really fun because they have a lot of LANs, and I do mean a lot. We probably played apart from like the main competition, we had the LAN at least like every month, and it's always really nice when you get to travel for LANs and then you just play there. And then like there's also like the whole crowd and stage, like the whole experience is just like really amazing.
And that's just French environment, isn't it's not like the
I mean, I think the French environment has a big part in it, because I feel like from the league in France is like in general esports in France is really big. Same for Spain. I feel like Spain and France are right now the two like by far most popular. Like I mean, two countries in Europe where esports is by far the most popular. Like this year alone, like I think French league had like over 100K viewers, which is mind blowing. Because before that it was like, I don't know, 10, 20K maybe on a good day, but now it's just every time there's French league, there's like over 100K viewers. And same for like Spanish league. I feel like the casters also have like a big part in it though, because like both countries have like the casters that are like always like really energetic. They always know how to hype up everything.
That's interesting. So yeah, we went a little bit into the area of what's the scene like, and why does it make you feel good as a pro player. But for example, what did you, maybe we didn't answer this question a little bit. You just mentioned travel expenses and travel arrangements being taken care of. Is there like any special perk that you got within your team that really made your life easier? Anything like that? Any like special treatment that you said, okay, this was really like a good, when you think about, okay, I'm really happy that I'm part of this team. You mentioned going to LANs, you mentioned going to competitions, you mentioned travel arrangements. Any kind of things that someone that would make this organization would have to think about, okay, this is really important to players. Anything that you maybe forgot?
I mean, like also, one big part of like why some organizations were like really nice to be in, and with the whole gaming houses, because they obviously had like way more money. That's like one thing. Like resources, obviously, always like the biggest reason. Because like you can be an organization that, let's say, pay like a small salary, then they maybe only organize boot camps. Like you have maybe 2 weekly boot camps in like the whole split, and that's it. And then you're mostly from home, and then maybe they don't even provide gear, but then like as I was in LDC, since the organization is like really big, I think it's like basically they're owned by the biggest electronic company in France, so money is never going to be an issue for them. And that definitely really helps when it comes to like comfort, because basically we lived in a gaming house, we always had everything we wanted. Traveling was always basically like really comfortable. We never like had to drive with like 10-hour drives with cars like some other teams had to do. So definitely like resources, like a really big part of like how much a player will enjoy an org. As sad as it is, that's kind of like,
I mean,
like the biggest factor, I would say.
Yeah, but I would maybe to put a scale on things. It's always, it's not always about the money, but money helps things go around, right? So do you think that, for example, if there was an organization that would have to decide, okay, I either pay the players a little bit more and maybe attract the better players, but I need to then cut the budget for other stuff? Or do you think it would make more sense for such organizations to try to make the player feel like you said, gaming house, a little bit of welcoming and everything, and then maybe cut the salary a little bit? What do you think would be best for the player, and how would you feel about that?
I mean, for me personally, I would probably rather go for like the gaming house option, because I feel like it's just way better for a team. You just improve way faster. Everything in the gaming house is just way better. And the best part about like gaming houses also, since it's like real life, people will be usually a bit more like, I guess, chill. Like nobody will shit talk you if you like see him in real life, basically. So it's like also much easier to work. So, but then it kind of depends on the organization. I guess if like the players you can get with a higher salary are like 10 times better, you obviously go for the players. If you just want like a quick gain, But if you want like a long-term project, I would definitely like opt to go for like a less salary, maybe even slightly worse players, and just like look to like train them and just make them be like really good. Because one issue that like a lot of that like in esports, one issue, as I said before, like every contract is usually like 3 months or something like that. So a lot of teams just want like this really like short-term like answers, or maybe like what a lot of teams also do, like maybe like not the big orgs, but like the smaller orgs, they maybe for one split they go like insane budget, they just throw like, yeah, we're just gonna throw, I don't know, 30K in like this 3 months. We pay these players, like we get these 5 insanely good players, and then they pray to God that they will manage to like win the whole split. And yeah, maybe it pays off, maybe it doesn't. And like usually I don't think it does. Like I feel like in semi-pro, even in like LCS, every time there was like a super team, like I feel like 4 out of 5 times it just failed, like the super team, and in the long run it doesn't pay off. Because there's also always like the clash of like egos, I guess, or how they say. Because you never know how the players are gonna get along. You can get like 5 best players in the world. If they don't get along, the team is just gonna be shit. Like there's just no way around it. Obviously, individual players will make the team better. And I feel like if you can get like 5 capses in a team, since they would all get along, that's obviously like the best way to do it. But that's never gonna be the case.
Yeah. An interesting question here is that you mentioned coaching and a little bit of that, what the team can give you. How much do you have experience with this? How much was there aside from specifically coaching in League of Legends, or maybe going through the scrims and everything to go through strategies and plays and so on? How much support do you get for other stuff? For example, I don't know, some sort of team building, some sort of psychological support, anything like that?
When I was like in the organizations that had the gaming house, we always had like some team building stuff to do. Like basically, I mean, I kind of enjoyed that always. Like when I was in Spain, we would go like once per 2 weeks, we would go to like escape room together or stuff like that, which is always really nice. Then maybe like, I don't know, play some board games, etc. And we also had a psychologist, who basically had like team meetings at least like once or twice a week, which was also, I think, really good. But one issue with like the whole like having psychologists is it's in the end it's up to like the players how much they kind of want help from the psychologist. So if you're like a really good psychologist and you basically have 5 players who like don't care and think like everything is fine, then it's kind of like hard for you to like really do much there. So it's a lot about the interest of the players as well.
Yeah, but it is an important part, right, of the team.
I would say for sure, yeah. I think like having a psychology in every team is like really important. I would agree, like maybe not like in the semi-professional level, because it's like kind of hard to afford, or maybe you have like a psychologist who's like practicing, and then maybe you can hire him for like much cheaper stuff like that. Because people who want to work full time, it's kind of hard for them to really like focus on something full time when they don't get like a livable wage out of it. Like no, that makes no sense for them why they would do that. But yeah, I definitely like agree with the whole like having I think every team like in the future should have like definitely like a trainer, like fitness instructor, like definitely like force the players to work out, because I feel like in the long run that helps so much. Like if you just do like regular workouts, you're gonna like you're not gonna have the basic issues you will have if you sit on the chair 10 hours a day. And then same with psychologists, I think it definitely helps a lot, like to, at least like once a week that the player has like a talk, even if it's like only 30 minutes, you know, you just say your opinion about like your teammates, etc. It definitely helps a lot. And when it comes like also to nutritionists and stuff like that, I feel like that also really helps, because the thing like with popularly eating a lot of junk food, that's still really true. Like in every semi-professional team I was, people don't really care about eating healthy whatsoever.
So maybe you had a nutritionist. How about the cook?
Yeah, we had the cook once, but it was like, she wasn't that good.
Okay, so you otherwise you mostly cooked yourself.
I mean, since I actually enjoy cooking myself, yes, I did actually. I was once in a team where I was basically cooking for them every day after scrims. But for me, it was like really nice, because it's kind of like, since you already played the game, it's kind of, you know, I don't want to play solo queue now, so might as well just go do something else that I enjoy doing. Because I think, like, as I said before, like grinding for like more than 8 hours a day becomes eventually pointless, you know. And it's also hard to focus. Like you will get you get way more out of like a 1 hour game when you fully focus than you get from like 3 hours of playing autopilot.
Yeah.
And also there was a question how do
Yeah,
coaches handle.
David Kine here asked, how do coaches handle those situations? You mentioned that there's a possibility for these big teams to get big egos, and how to deal with that. I mean, it's hard. You said that if a person is not willing to change, it's not willing to change, but
Yeah,
they probably have to deal with this situation.
I mean, I've never like been a part of a team that had like an issue with a lot of egos, so I can't really speak from experience. But one thing that I had in a team was, since we had certain like responsibilities, like every player, and if you didn't follow those responsibilities, you would basically get fined or they would cut a part of your salary. But that didn't work in the end because the players who like didn't follow that didn't get fined anyway. So I don't really see what's the point. Like the contract literally said, if you don't do this, you're gonna get fined. Then the player didn't do that and he didn't get fined. So it was like, okay, nice. I guess that's not working. So I feel like one thing to do is definitely like, yeah, you can maybe have like some punishments if players behave like really bad. And the other part is like, I feel like, yeah, the best way to help them is like, as you mentioned before, like maybe through psychology, or I feel like it helps if your coach is can have the authority, because a lot of coaches, like you have basically like two types of coaches. I feel like you have like the smart guy, like strategic coach, who basically knows the game well, he knows all the strats, he helps you out. But then that guy usually, I think, helps if he has like another coach who usually has the authority over the players. Because like the worst thing that can happen to a coach is basically the player is not respecting you. And that definitely happens in a lot of like big ego teams, like a coach approaches them and they're like, yeah, this guy doesn't know shit. So why is he even here? Why is he talking? So it's like, I would imagine it's probably like really hard if you're like in a super team with like 5 players who think they're like the best as a coach.
And maybe that's also an interesting point. Do you see coaches, for example, I know that a couple of coaches, maybe not even in League of Legends, but definitely in CSGO, a lot of coaches are former players. How do you see this in League of Legends happening? Is this also true, or are coaches like a special branch of people that maybe you mentioned before, some people are cannot get mechanically that good, maybe they're strategically really good and become coaches, or is it the same as it's with other sports, that a lot of times coaches come from former players?
I mean, definitely a lot of coaches are former players. I think one thing in League, I don't know how it is in CSGO, but for in League also, like at least in semi-pro, a lot of coaches are like, I don't know how to like really say to not be like too mean, but they're like they just don't do anything. Like I feel like a lot of people see coaching, since it's not considered like that important in smaller teams for some reason. A lot of people just view it as like, yeah, this is like some free money, etc. Like, because I had a lot of coaches who basically, like when we had the reviews, they like just didn't know much about the game, so their input was kind of worthless. So it was mostly us players talking with each other, and then outside of that, they barely do any prep as well, And what was really like mind-blowing to me is like how often I heard, like when I approached the organization, I tell them like, yeah, this guy is not doing anything, like why is he here? And then they're like, yeah, we can't kick him or stuff like that, And it's like a really weird situation sometimes when it like comes to this. But being like an ex-player definitely helps for sure. Like I feel like if I definitely prefer being coached by a player, by a coach who I know was challenger player, than by some guy who was, I don't know, gold or something. Like he definitely has way more input about the game. He knows way more. And I think overall it's just better. And I feel like in the future, like most coaches will probably just be ex-pro players anyway. Or like you will have 2 coaches, and one guy will be like this ex-pro player, as I said before, who knows a lot about the game. And the other guy will be like maybe more of like I guess like from a psychologist like standpoint or something like that, or like just help the team like in a different way that's not gameplay related.
Okay, I forgot a little bit about the poll actually, so maybe Živa, if you can hit the poll, got caught in the discussion. So the poll is about, would you want to go pro, or did you ever consider about going pro?
So there's more questions here about analysts.
Yeah.
And
while we wait for everyone to fill out the poll, David had a really good question. I know that in conventional sports, analysts for most of the teams are like, there are big teams of analysts who analyze your game. How is it in League of Legends? Do you have that experience? Do you know if there are any? How does this work?
I mean, most teams I've been a part of had an analyst, or like at least the coach had like his own analyst. I never really interacted with them much because usually the analyst just goes to the coach and then the coach kind of forwards that to the players. But I feel like analysts definitely have like a really big part in this, because one thing that's like much different about League than it is other sports, at least I would imagine. I don't watch other sports much, but in video games, like players and teams have way more like patterns that is just so easy for you to see. Like this player does this, for example, every single game, this player does that, you know, this player works here, etc. There's like so much more prep that you can do on a certain team. So I feel like having an analyst that basically focuses like 3 hours on specifically your opponent and basically just watches replays of them and analyzes everything, that helps like a lot, because since the game is so team oriented at the moment, having good preparation helps like so much, especially in a game like League, where also you have the whole draft, you have to draft good champions and like good team compositions. Having an analyst does like so much. And I feel like a lot of coaches, I guess maybe they don't have the time to do it, so that's why they hire analysts and they help them out. But from my experience, I would honestly say that analysts like help me out more than coaches, like in general, when it comes to like actually playing the game.
And you mentioned that, yeah, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Thanks, Jure. On following down on the people helping you, what about technology? What about software? What about platforms? What about things like mobalytics?
I mean, I've never like I've used mobalytics like a few times, but not as much. Like I think what most players from League do, there's like a site called ProBuilds, which is basically shows match histories of like any player, like pro player who played like in all the big leagues, like Korean League, Chinese, European, etc. And then you can just like write the name of the champion, and then you basically just have like the full, like you have like every like matches from like 2 weeks of like that champion, like which player played it, and then you can just which champion he played against, you have match histories, everything. So you usually go there and you just analyze yourself. But definitely these sites for sure help. I feel like they don't really help you that much in terms of like gameplay. I feel like that would help more if you like watched actual VODs or like coaches who like work on YouTube, or you actually maybe hire a coach. But when it comes to like pure like item builds or like just champion statistics, etc., like what's good, what's not, then these sites definitely help a lot in that regard.
Do you feel like what would be okay? What would be from a to follow up that question? What would be from a technology point of view if you had no limitations on any kind of limitations? What would be like a technology platform that you would definitely want to have as a pro player? What is like the thing to have? Like no limitations.
I mean, one thing is definitely like, I don't know how that's not in the game yet. Like League does have like the whole training feature, but I feel like it's so like lackluster. Like just having a practice tool where, for example, you scrim a team, you know, like let's say the game is even, then at like 20 minutes there's like a huge fight, and then one team maybe like does a mistake, or the other team wins, whatever. What would be really good is that you would have like a replay system, or so to say, that basically lets you just play out the team fight again, and you just do it over and over again. And then maybe you just go back like in time in the game for like 3 minutes, and then you just replay that, you know. Something like that would be, I think, really insane in League, because it would like help basically if I want to practice something as a player, then I basically have to play a full game for that like 1 minute where I can practice that, instead of just practicing on that 1 minute for like 1 hour, you know. Because that like with traditional sports, that's easy to do, because you can just like, I can just like throw like shots like with my basket like from 3-pointers like for 1 hour straight, you know. But I can't do that in League. Like I cannot play the same matchup, like the same laning phase in League. I would have to play like 20 games for that to happen again, unless I would practice 1v1s, but that's kind of useless from like a game that's like purely like team based. So something like that would be really good. And then also, as in like CSGO, what I don't understand is like CSGO, basically you can access any VODs from pros. I can just go watch any pro match they played, and I can watch it from like any perspective I want of any player. And you can do that in League. I can't just like download the replay of, I don't know, let's say G2 versus Fnatic, and then watch the whole match from like perspective of like one of the top laners. And I feel like that's also something that's like really missing in a game like this. And I feel like that would definitely help improve the players. They did add like the feature of like pro view or something like that, I think, like less split, but I guess they stopped with that, and I think that was like a really good thing. But I would just personally like that, you know, you could it would be easier to access the VODs apart from like YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see the poll results. 5 people basically never thought about it, not interested. I am one. I would be guessing who that is in this audience. And then there's one that would like to be if the opportunity comes. Interesting. Maybe that one person, if you feel comfortable enough exposing yourself, maybe you have a specific question for Bor. I think this is a great opportunity for you to use this opportunity that you have, maybe if you want to. Okay, thank you everyone for the poll. There's 2 also questions from David I think are important. Did any of these companies that these technology companies that are helping League of Legends in any way cooperate with pro teams? Did they do teams support these platforms in any way?
I don't know if like they actually like cooperated, but I mean, I personally like support these platforms for sure. I feel like anything that basically helps like players to just get better, I think is good. I feel like some of these like could definitely be included in the game software, and I don't really see why not. I feel like when it comes like to these kind of things, Riot makes like a lot of weird decisions sometimes themselves anyway. But yeah, I think they could definitely like I could see like in the future like teams cooperating with platforms like this way more. Because I feel like usually like when a coach wants to like scout an opposing team, like one of these like platforms usually helps a lot. Or since like if you can't get any other access, this is like usually in the end your best bet anyway. So I feel like it could definitely be like I guess like appreciated more, let's say like that.
Yeah. Cool, thanks. We're a little bit over, but I want to ask you one last question that I had prepared, and again it's a theoretical one, so feel free to use your imagination. If you could request an ideal environment for growing pro players, not necessarily that you already are a pro player and you would like to be in this environment, but for people who want to be pro players, what kind of environment would they need to be like really to fast track them? Basically, what would mean? What would like a pro player accelerator be like? What would you need that?
I mean, like the thing is, one thing that definitely helps, as I said before, is like gaming houses. So if you're like able to like relocate players, that's like the best option, but that's usually like really costly. So I actually like don't know. I think just having like basically people who will like work with you individually, that already really helps, like coaches, like individual coaches, and basically just creating like, I guess, an environment like it's really different if you train like five players as a team, or only like one specific player. Because I feel like if it's only down to one player, if you just have like a good individual coach who like spends like a few hours like with you, and then you just focus on like the game, you watch VODs together, I think that already like helps so much like for one player. But when it comes to teams, then you just kind of, I think, need like a good atmosphere. Like that's one thing for sure. Like the first thing is like getting players who are willing to work together, and then after that, I think just getting like maybe like having like a venue where you can go to is always nice. Like I think the real life interaction is always like a big part of helping a team become better faster. And then yeah, basically just having like the base, like the things that you need like to play the game, and like obviously like having like a good coach and like staff always helps a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting what you mentioned, that for a single person, the best thing to have is like one person that would help you, and then for the team, you actually need a whole environment to support that team, right? So it's easy to bring one player to a higher level, but then again, it gets a little bit more complicated when you want to build a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like usually in the past, when you look like in like season 3, 4, 5, where you could qualify for Challenger Series through the ladder basically as 5, every team was like just 5 players together, you know, no team at that time like out of these had like actual coaches or anything like that. So at that time it was pretty much you just relied on yourself.
Interesting question from Nusha. From other perspective, what was the hardest part for you for being a professional player? What was the biggest pain basically that you had?
I mean, I think the hardest part is, even though I wouldn't say that's like that true anymore, but like in the past, I feel like one hard thing is like I guess you feel pressured in a sense that you know that you can't basically do this for forever. So you feel pressured in a sense like, oh, if I fail here or like stuff like that, maybe it's over. I don't, and like in this case, you know, for me, I think that was like a bit, like sometimes I was a bit, I guess, worried about it. But when it comes purely to like playing, I mean, I never had like any issues. I guess it's hard when you go abroad for like a longer time, maybe like you miss your friends, etc. I would say that's probably like the hardest part, like balancing real life and like league, because basically when you go somewhere for 3 months, all you do there is play league and maybe like talk with friends online. You don't really get to interact with people in real life. But other than that, I don't think like I don't think it's like that stressful as one would say. Or like I guess it also depends how much you win, obviously. Like if you lose everything, then it becomes like really depressing.
Yeah. And then you decide to be a coach.
I mean, yeah, usually then if things go bad, you just go for a coach. Like the 3 months contracts are, yeah, definitely like stressful as well. Like since, as I said, yeah, you don't know how long you can do this, and it's not always like reassuring that you will get like the salary or that you can live off of this. But personally, for me, I guess it's been like overall, it's been like quite nice in terms of that.
Cool. Okay, I think we should wrap it up a little bit. It's getting a little bit late. So to just recap a little bit, becoming a pro means just staying focused, being on track, try to get some support, expose yourself.
I mean, definitely marketing is like insane, like exposing yourself on social media and stuff like that, I think is like the biggest factor for being a pro. Because even if you're not a pro anymore, it also like opens like way more doors.
Yeah, definitely. And then maybe for the environment itself, what needs to happen, definitely for, like you mentioned, for a single person to grow faster, we would need coaches. We already have. I know that some people are even in Slovenia are coaching, but maybe you need a coach on a really high level to push you to that next skill level. And then for teams, organizations that can support gaming houses, that can support staff, that will help the team grow, that will help the team connect.
I mean, that obviously depends like on the whole level of the league, but yeah, the higher like the level, the more you need this stuff basically.
Yeah. And just like an ideal environment would be to have everything right, to keep you covered on all fronts, and then help you with anything that is not gaming related also. Like this is a really important part of this. In terms of technology, you already mentioned that most of these are useful, that already exists, but in ideal situation you would need like a replay button, but unfortunately that's in hands of Riot and League of Legends. So, or maybe someone can, someone from the audience has a good idea on how to hack that and come to that. So yeah, thank you again, Bor. Maybe if there's any more questions, we can do it after the recording is over. Thank you, Bor, for talking to us. It was really insightful, a lot of useful information, I think.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you to the audience for great questions. Actually, really good questions from the audience. And yeah, you can check us on Facebook. You can check us on social media. Živa will post the links down below. Also, I would like to ask you to leave the feedback if you think we can do anything better, if you've enjoyed it and anything you would like to add. We're on Slack. You can also post on Facebook. You can also join us on Meetup to stay in touch for our meetups. And that's it. Thank you everyone for joining. Feel free to stay a little bit if you want to chat. Otherwise, I think we can finish this.